Good morning, everybody. This is Jeb Blunt. I'm the author of People by You and the founder and CEO of salesgravy.com. This is going to be a short webinar, and the focus today is aligning the three processes of sales. Let's take a real quick look at what it takes to be great in sales. And the three keys to mastering sales are your mindset, what you believe, your attitudes, your skill set, so how you're able to use and leverage techniques, and a toolkit, so the different tools that you have in order to drive sales. Today we're going to focus primarily on mindset and drift a little bit into skill set. The core objective of this webinar is really to get you thinking. It's not so much to give you a ton of data and to give you a bunch of techniques, but to really get you thinking about your sales process and how you're aligning that to your prospects. Now, as we go through this, keep in mind that there are only three things that you can control in sales. You can control your actions, what you choose to do. You can control your reactions, how you choose to respond, and you can control your mindset, what you believe, your attitude, how you see things, and how you adjust to things. And this conversation around the three processes of sales is going to require you to some extent to shift your mindset about what you believe about sales process. Now, there's nothing in the world that I can teach you in any sales training, in any speech, in any book, anything that I've done, if you're not working with a qualified prospect, and it just doesn't matter. You have to be working with a qualified prospect. So before we begin, let's just take a real quick look at segmenting and targeting. Now, I typically segment my prospects into three basic buckets: high potential or high probability, medium potential or medium probability, and low potential or low probability. So I call them HPPs, MPPs, LPPs. And it's a common segmentation strategy for most businesses. And the key is to be focusing most of your time on your high potential prospects. Further, I take a look at my entire prospect database, so my general database, and I break this into additional segments. So when I look at my high potential prospects, I basically break these into my targeted opportunities. Now, that's somewhere, and this is not every business, depending on what you're working on, somewhere between 250 to 500 targeted opportunities. These are my highest potential opportunities that fit my ideal prospect or ideal customer profile that I want to make sure that they're always in front of me and that I'm leveraging all of my tools and all of my focus to get into. Now, if you're in enterprise accounts or you have a smaller database, those targeted opportunities may be even smaller. I've got a client of mine, we just did a list of 50 targeted opportunities. But these are the folks that you're going to focus your time and energy in getting into. My next group are conquest prospects, and these are typically my competitor accounts. So these are accounts that my competitor currently has that I want and that I want to take, and I'm going to be focusing my attention on stealing these or taking these from my competitor. There's typically going to be between 25 and 100 of these, and the reason I have that list is so that my entire organization and myself were focused on getting into those. And then there are my dream accounts, and my dream accounts are the game changer accounts. These are accounts that in my particular market or in my industry that if I were to get one of these accounts would change everything. It would be a ripple that would roll through the industry. So there are going to be 10 to 25 of these accounts on your list, and you're probably going to get one, maybe two of these a year. But this is how you get everybody in your organization, including marketing, leveraging their resources to focus and primarily on these accounts to get you in the door. A lot of that's going to be creating familiarity, but it's also going to be strategy. It's going to keep you aware of when buying windows are going to open so that when you get into those accounts, you have the best opportunity to close those deals. So that's typically where I begin. The next thing that we have to understand is people. And I have a couple of guiding principles on people. And this is critical to understanding the three processes. So when we think about sales skills today, there are two things that really matter, and these skills are at a premium. And it's almost a paradox in our society where technology has taken on such a big part of our lives: social media, the internet, our ability to communicate anytime, anywhere, anyhow. And that is interpersonal and intrapersonal skills. And we're going to talk about those in just a moment. Interpersonal skills are how you manage your own emotions, and intrapersonal skills are how you manage the emotions of other people. And sales professionals who are adept at managing both of those, their own emotions and the emotions of other people, they become highly successful. And they're the folks that have a high degree of what we call sales-specific emotional intelligence. Here are a couple of guiding principles. These are not all of them, but there's a couple of them. One is that prospects are people. Far too often we see our prospects as a number, or we put the prospect and the people working at that prospect, and we're using prospects as interchangeably as a company and as a human being, but we see them in the abstract. And the reality is that they're human beings. They're irrational. They're fallible. They have ups and downs. They make decisions that make no sense sometimes. And they're going to be making a decision to do business with you in a lot of cases because of some weird thing about you or your company that maybe isn't the thing that you're pitching, but it's the thing that really connects with them. And that leads us to the second guiding principle. People typically act or buy on emotion and then later justify that in their mind and to other people with logic. And this concept of buying or acting on emotion isn't just something that we say in sales. It is substantiated by a lot of facts and data and studies that are carried on by neuroscientists who test people's willingness to buy an emotion. A great example of this is the old Pepsi challenge. And in the Pepsi challenge, what happened was they would sit people down and they would give them a blind taste test. They would put Coke and Pepsi next to each other. And in most cases, people would choose Pepsi. But when they set them in a non-blind taste test, they take people and they put a can of Pepsi or a can of Coke in front of them, most people would choose Coke. And one of the things that scientists discovered is that right behind the optic nerve is our center of our brain that feels warm and fuzzy things. And the way people perceived a can of Coke was warm and fuzzy. So when they saw it, it made them feel like that was the better tasting beverage. The way they tested this to see that it was really an emotional decision was they took people who had that part of their brain destroyed in some way. They gave them the same taste test, blind taste test. They picked Pepsi, and when they saw the cans, they picked Pepsi because they didn't have the emotion that was guiding them. So people are making irrational decisions based on emotion and then later justifying that with logic. And if you're in B2B sales, you should never forget that the people you were selling to are using someone else's money to solve their problems. And those problems tend to be emotional. People tend to buy for their reasons, not yours. And this is critical in sales because most salespeople are pitching their reasons. They're talking about the things that are important to them. But people aren't buying for your reasons, the things that you're pitching. They're buying for the things that are connecting with them. And this is why aligning the sales process is so critical. And finally, you're always on stage. Your prospects are watching every single thing that you do. And they're judging you based on their intentions, not yours. Most salespeople today that I meet and that I know are professional, and they're going in with the best intentions. They want to help their prospects. And they don't realize that their prospects are looking for what they're going to do wrong. They're looking for reasons not to trust you, not reasons to trust you. So you have to manage everything you do to be perfect. And there's some other guiding principles, but these are keys to thinking about sales process alignment. Now, when we think about the sales process, we're typically thinking about a defined process that our company has given us. And most companies have some type of process. I'll share with you what that looks like in a basic format. But most people have a defined process, and it's typically linear. And it begins with connecting or building rapport, qualifying, or putting something into the funnel. But it begins there. We call it the connect step, but it begins with connecting. And the next step is typically discovery, gathering information, asking questions, understanding the customer. The next step is presenting. We call it bridging, but it's presenting a case for why the customer should do business with you or the prospect should do business with you. That follows by asking them to take some action. Now, that could be an informal ask. You're asking them to move to the next step or to give you another meeting. Then it could be a formal ask for the business itself. And then there's usually turning around objections or negotiation. And if you're in more of a transactional cycle, that's going to be really quick. It could be all in one call. If you're in a long cycle complex sale, then those steps could have many substeps. And most companies have different names that are labels that they give the steps, but it's typically company specific, or industry specific, or product specific. But it's a linear process that you have to go through. It's measured, so most of us are measuring our sales process inside the CRM, and it's somewhat inflexible, and it needs to be inflexible because typically salespeople, they stall deals because they skip a step. So if you go through the process and you go through the process on step and you have a qualified prospect, it's pretty predictable what's going to happen. Then there's the buying process. Now, the buying process can be both informal or formal. Most companies have some type of buying process. Now, again, if it's transactional, the buying process may be that the owner of the company makes a decision. If it's a complex sale and it's enterprise-wide, then you may have a committee. There's going to be influencers. There's going to be coaches. There's going to be a process by which they vet you. A lot of big buys these days will go through an RFP process. It's typically linear, so they're starting in a particular point and they're ending in a typical point. So today, because of internet and information, the buying process may start before you get engaged with the prospect. So they may be doing some research. They may have an understanding they've got a problem. There may be a trigger event. It may start if you go and interrupt your prospect and you bring to them a new opportunity. It may begin when you create that need or create that desire through your prospecting interaction. But it's typically going to be unique to a particular product line, a vendor, an industry, a company, what have you. It's often measured, especially in big buys. The purchasing team is measuring the process. But here's the important thing. It can be shaped. And this is critical because you have a sales process, and we understand if we skip the sales process, we skip a step, we're going to stall our deal. So, for example, I've got one of my enterprise software clients. In the discovery process and the presentation process, there's a series of demos that they have to go through. Those demos have to be one after another because they build on each other and they create a case for why they should do business. And this is a long cycle sale, 2-year sale. And if they don't go through this process, they could stall somewhere during that 24-month period and lose a deal before they ever know they lost it, and then spend a ton of money and effort and emotion trying to move a deal forward that is never going to move forward. So you have to move your sales process along. So when you're presented with a buying process that doesn't meet your sales process, you have to shape it. You've got to get in there with your prospect. And I'll give you an example. At one point in my career, I worked with a company, and we sold on-site childcare facility for companies. So on-site childcare facilities so that employees could bring their children to work. And these were big deals. These were $10 to $20 million deals. They were really getting married with our prospect. There was a lot of risk in it. And most of those deals were initiated because the HR department would see they had a need for on-site childcare. There was a desire for it. They would send out an RFP. It would be thick. You would spend, weeks and weeks and weeks putting together an RFP, tons of resources. You would send it in, and most of the time nothing would happen. And because these were really big deals, hard decisions to make. And the problem was that our sales process wasn't aligning to their buying process. They would send us an RFP. They were in complete control, and we would lose most deals. And if you send out RFPs, you know this to be true. So what we changed was we would not do an RFP until we got to meet with the CEO. And the reason that we made that change was because the only person in an organization that is going to make a $20 million deal to put an on-site childcare facility in a building is the CEO. If the CEO wasn't on board, it doesn't make a difference what you did. The buying process and the sales process were going to work together. So we started making that demand. We would not turn in the RFP until we met with the CEO. Now, there was a lot of consternation from a sales team about doing this, but the reality was that it worked. The HR department needed our RFP in order to make a decision. They needed our information, so we had leverage. And because we used that leverage, we were able to shape the buying process so that we changed the buying process so that the CEO met with us. Then we could get information from them. Then we would align that. Then we would shape the RFP, and then we would give them information. So it put us back in control. Now, once you have those two things aligned, it's not always possible, but you want to work on doing that. You also have to understand the decision process. Now, the decision process is typically individual. Now, that individual could be a part of a committee or a group. That person could be someone who is actually making a buying decision, either making a decision to fund the deal or to sign a contract, or it could be the same person. It could be an influencer. It could be someone seeking out information. It could be a coach. It could be any of those people, but these decision processes are made individually. The one thing you can never, ever, ever forget, especially in B2B sales, is this. You have an individual person using someone else's money to solve their problem. Now, these decision-making processes are emotional. they're irrational, they're individual, they're nonlinear, and they're influenced through human interaction and human emotion. Here's an example of this. Now, this is pretty surface, and obviously, if you're in complex, enterprise level deals, or you're doing B2B, all of these things aren't in play. But just to understand how we as human beings make such irrational decisions, a group of scientists got together and they did a study on liquor stores. And in a liquor store, they would send a person in and they would play German music. And it turned out on days when customers were going in and playing German music, they sold more beer. On days where they were playing French music, they sold more wine. When they asked people who had bought beer on the day they were playing German music why they bought beer, they couldn't explain it. They would give you a bunch of logical reasons. They were thirsty for beer. They wanted beer. They wanted to try German beer that day. But the reality is that the statistics told us that in playing the music, we actually were influencing the person to make an irrational decision. Same thing with laundry detergent. They would send laundry detergent home with subjects in 2 different color boxes and ask the people to rate the quality of the laundry detergent. People would consistently rate the laundry detergent in a one-colored box. The box was red and green or whatever the color of the box was. They would rate that as higher quality than the laundry detergent in the other box, although it was the same detergent. Same thing with wine. They would put people together, in front of wine. They would have wine bottles labeled by the price. Subjects would consistently say that the wine that was in the higher price bottle tasted better than the wine in the lower price bottle, even though it was the same wine. I have a client who sold a deal. It took 18 months to sell the deal. And he worked and worked and worked. And at the end, he asked the buyer, why did they buy from him? And the response was, we just liked you. You stayed in touch with us. You sent us birthday cards. You got to know us. You understood us. It was a $500,000 decision that was locking this company in for at least 10 years in this deal. And the person came clean and said she made the decision because she liked the rep better. This is important to understand. When these 3 processes align, the sales process, your defined process, the buying process, and the decision process, it becomes almost impossible not to buy from you. Now, this is a basic sales process. We connect, we discover, we bridge, we solve problems, we present, we ask, we close the sale, we negotiate. Everything all on the way, we're trying to move to the next step. Now, if we understand that, we also understand that there is a decision-making process. Now, this decision process, right, this is the individual process. This is the person that is making the decision to either go to the next step with you, give you the next meeting, give you a plant tour, hand you information, give you invoices, introduce you to other people that are in play there. And these questions, these are the 5 questions that matter most in sales. This is how you make decisions. This is how I make decisions. When we are faced with buying something from another human being, the first question we ask of that human being is, do I like you? Are you a person that I like? Now, some of that happens at the subconscious level. We sometimes know whether we like someone before we even know it consciously. Our subconscious mind makes a decision. And some things we can't control. For example, we can't control whether or not we look like a bully that beat them up in grade school. We can't control whether they like our tie. We can't control whether or not they like our tone of voice. But there's a lot of things that we can control. We can control being nice, being polite, putting a smile on our face. We can control doing pre-call planning so that we have some information so we can ask better questions. We can control our demeanor. We can control flexing our style to their style. The next question that we ask of the person is, do you listen to me? By the way, the number 1 complaint that buyers have about sellers is they don't listen. So do you listen to me? And this is pretty easy to say. It's hard to do. But listening is the gateway to connections. It's the gateway to gathering information. If a person is listening to you, by the way, it makes you feel important. And the most insatiable human need is the need to feel important or significant. In fact, it's so insatiable, this need to feel important, that it is the singularity of virtually all human behavior in the first world. And when we make another person feel important, we give them, in fact, the greatest gift that we can give another human being. By the way, when we give them that gift, it taps into something called the law of reciprocity. You do something nice for someone, it causes them to want to do something nice for you. And so as we're asking our buyers to make decisions, to move to the next step, to buy something from us, to give us something, to just answer our questions, they feel an obligation to do that when we're making them feel important. Now, there's lots of ways that you can make someone feel important. You can know something about them. You can do some research. You can treat them like they're the most important person to you. You can give them all your attention. You can give them a compliment. You can give them a gift. The easiest, fastest way to make another human being feel important is to just listen to them. Just turn off your mouth and listen. And, oh, by the way, we talk a lot in sales about personality styles. We love to talk about dealing with drivers or directors and dealing with analyzers or socializers or introverts. But the reality is that if you understand your personal style, and this is important, and your mouth is shut, it doesn't make a difference what your personal style is. You flex your style to them because you're listening. So we ask the question, we answer the question, do I like you? Do you listen to me? Do you make me feel important? Do you get me in my problems? Now, this is a question that we all want to know. Do you get me? Do you understand me? The one thing that we know about people is that people communicate in stories. When you're asking great questions and you're listening to them, you not only make them feel important, but you allow them to tell their story. The reasons that human beings communicate in stories, and this me and you and everybody on earth, if you just listen around you, people are communicating in stories, they're telling stories, they're not communicating in bullet points. The reason we communicate in stories is because we want to be understood. Our stories are nonlinear. They don't line up perfectly. So when we're listening to those stories, we're able to understand our prospect. And when we understand our prospect, we also understand their language. What prospects are looking for is, do you get me? Do you speak my language? Do you understand me, the person who has the problem, right, and understand logically what's happening? How do I solve this problem? I'm spending someone else's money to solve my problem. We have to prove that we get them when we understand them. And then finally, do I trust and believe you? Do I like you? Do you listen to me? Do you make me feel important? Do you get me in my problems? Do I trust and believe you? And trust is the foundation of everything. No trust, no deal. No trust, no sale. No trust, you won't go to the next step. And trust is built one brick at a time. It begins with like and trust are connected at the hip. So if I'm proving that I'm likable, I'm also demonstrating that I can be trusted. If I'm listening to you, I'm doing the one thing that most sellers don't do. The more a person trusts me, the more they will talk to me. And our goal is to get them to talk. Now, answering these 5 questions, the decision process, begins with something called sales EQ. Sales EQ is sales-specific emotional intelligence. It's also the name of my brand new book, and it's available now for pre-sale or pre-order on Amazon, along with my brand new book, Fanatical Prospecting. And sales EQ these are the traits that you need in order to not only align the processes, but also to answer these 5 decision-making questions. Do I like you? Do you listen to me? Do you make me feel important? Do you get me in my problems? And I trust and believe you. It begins with empathy. When you, in your heart, when you make the decision to try to understand other people and try to see things through their perspective, you begin to ask better questions. You begin to get out of your own head. You begin to get away from pitching and start asking questions. Now, one of the problems that we have in sales, and one of the problems we have as human beings, frankly, is that most people believe that to be in control of a conversation, to be in control of the process, they have to be doing all the talking. And I assure you it is just the opposite. It is the person who is asking the questions that's in control. And by asking questions, you get to understand people. Now, along with empathy, you become concerned about other people, how they feel. And you begin to get tuned into their emotions. This allows you to listen deeply. Listening deeply means listening with all of your senses. It means looking for not just the words that they're saying, but the emotional cues. Now, if you're in inside sales, this is harder. 80% of human communication is visual. So if you're in inside sales, if you make sales over the telephone, you've got one of the hardest jobs in sales, because every day, like you're having to get on the telephone and do your job with an arm and a leg tied behind your back blindfolded. So you have to listen to voice inflection, what's happening, and you have to turn on your empathy and pay attention to that. Listen for those emotional cues. It's those emotional cues that tell you why people are going to make decisions. If you ask questions around those emotional cues, you get to pull out the reason why it's really important to them to solve their problem. If you spend time talking about that, the person who was using someone else's money to solve their problem, it becomes easier for them to buy from you. They begin to say, wow, this person really gets me. Now, being tuned into other people's emotions begins with self-awareness. It means that not only are you aware of your own preferred communication style, and we all have one, but you're also aware of how your style impacts other people. This is empathy. And by the way, we are all empathic. We are born with it. We all have that. If you have no empathy, then you're a psychopath. And if you're a psychopath, it's unlikely that you are on this particular webinar. So we all have that. Some of us are more tuned into that than other people. It's something that you have to practice at. It's something you have to focus on. You have to walk into your sales conversations and put away the things that you want and focus on the things that your prospect wants. You have to answer those questions. Do I like you? Do you listen to me? Do you make me feel important? Do you get me in my problems so trust and believe you? Along the way, as you become self-aware, as you get tuned into other people's emotions, then you're able to leverage situational awareness. Now, what this helps you do, as you understand where you fit into the process, you know where I am in the process, you know where your customer is or your prospect is in their buying process, where they fit in their buying process, and what decisions they have to make inside that buying process to move to the next step. And once you get that, right, it gets a lot easier to ask and a lot easier to bridge or shape what you're doing to allow them to make better decisions. And finally, it's self-control. And this is, for me, like the most important thing. It's the biggest problem that gets in the way of salespeople doing their job. And that is that sales is emotional. It is driven by emotion. It lives in emotion. And we typically, when we're thinking about emotion and we think about these processes, we think about emotion from our customer side, our prospect side. Right? They're people. They're rational. They make decisions. Even though we lay out an entire case, they make a decision to stay with a vendor, by the way, for example, that is screwing them over. And they stick with that decision even though it's not in their best interest because, well, the status quo is easier than making a change to a devil that they don't know. That's irrational, but it happens. That's what we typically think about. But emotions are on both sides of the fence. Our prospect has an insatiable need to feel important, and so do you as a salesperson. For them to feel important, they want to talk. They want to tell you their story. For you to feel important, you want to pitch. You want to tell them your story. You want to tell them your reasons for them to buy, even though they make decisions based on their reasons to buy. You have disruptive emotions, I don't want to ask for the next step because I'm afraid. Or you have the disruptive emotion, wow, this person is not really into me. You have the disruptive emotion, you're a socializer and you're dealing with an introvert. They don't feel like, you don't feel like they're that into you. You have fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You have excitement and enthusiasm, by the way, that can sometimes get in the way of your deal because your disruptive emotion, excitement, gets in the way of your self-awareness, situational awareness, to know how to respond, how to ask, what to do in that particular moment. Your ability to manage your own emotions, interpersonal skills, managing your disruptive emotions gives you the ability to be aware of what's happening around you, the situational awareness of knowing where you are in the sales process, the ability to align those three processes so that you can get the most out of your deal and that you can respond to your prospect in the most appropriate way. What I want you to do leaving this webinar is I want you to think about these disruptive emotions. I want you to go back and I want you to think about the decision process. The 5 most important questions. Do I like you? Do you listen to me? Do you make me feel important? Do you get me in my problems with trust and believe you? And I want you to go through the deals that you're working on now, and I want you to check off how are you answering those questions for your prospect? Because when you answer those 5 questions in the affirmative, and when these 3 processes are aligned, the sales process, the buying process, and the decision-making process, it becomes almost impossible for people not to do business with you. Before I leave the day, I want to pitch you on a couple of things. First, go check out my brand new book, Sales EQ. We just put it up on Amazon. It should be up on Barnes & Noble. You can take a look at that. It's not going to be out for a number of months, but it's a book that will give you a deeper understanding of this particular mindset that we're talking about, aligning the sales processes. In the meantime, you can pick up a copy of my bestseller, People Buy You. And People Buy You will get deep into understanding the decision process, how to answer questions or ask questions, how to build real connections that you below the surface, and open your prospects up so that you can get information that you can build a case for that will truly differentiate you from your prospect, from your competitors. And then take a look at my #1 bestseller. It's been #1 on Amazon. It's in every single Barnes & Noble store, Fanatical Prospecting, that will help you get more good quality deals into your sales funnel. If you have any questions at all, you can reach me. I'm at salesgravy.com, or you can reach me on my website, jebblunt.com. That's JEBBLOUNT.com. I've got a bunch of other webinars up on this Bright Talk channel, so please go check them out. We'll be adding a couple more anytime or on-demand webinars today. And I look forward to seeing you. And, oh, by the way, I left this out. When you buy Fanatical Prospecting, there's a code in the book. It gives you access to fanaticalprospecting.com. You'll get a 1-year access. It's about $1,200 worth of value for your $20 purchase. And we just added a brand new online course called 15-Minute Sales Training. And you're going to find a ton of online courses, videos, articles, downloads, forums that will talk about some of the concepts we talk about here. And thank you very much for joining me for this Bright Talk webinar. And come see me at jebblunt.com and salesgravy.com. And, of course, you can connect with me on any of the social networks. Thank you.